Welcome back to another episode of Meredyth with a Y. I am your host, Meredyth Willits, and today I am so excited to talk to Tom Bosworth of Bosworth and D'Angelo Law Firm. He is a catastrophic claims attorney out of Philly, and we are getting to all things we should and shouldn't be doing. So find a way to stay with us. Hello, everyone. This is Meredyth with a Y, and I am your host, Meredyth Willits. Today we are going to go deep, changing lives, and I am giving you the keys to the castle. Attorney Tom Bosworth, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Sure thing, Meredith. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you. And for those of you that don't know, I have two podcasts, and Tom is going to be on both of them, but this one is for Meredyth with a Y. So we are going to get into the semantics and the background and the everything about actually being a catastrophic death and injury attorney. And you talk about all of this stuff on social media. But this we're talking about today, what I want to get to is, why are you a catastrophic attorney?
Well, I can't say it was written in stone for me. My dad was a police officer. I grew up in a town of literally 3,000 people in rural Western Massachusetts, Berkshire County. My dad was a police officer. My mom worked in the restaurant field, and so we were blue collar, for lack of a better way of putting it. But I had an experience when I was 18 where my grandmother, who helped raise me significantly, ended up dying from medical negligence. And that kind of really shaped my life. We tried to find a lawyer to take the case at the time and in my small town, and nobody would take it. And, I remember just feeling cast aside. And that was like my first exposure to like lawyers, right? And they were all talking about this integral woman in my life as if she were just some number to them. And it was really traumatizing to me to go through that and just feel like nobody cared. So being a competitor, and I played college baseball and basketball, and I remember thinking, like, man, isn't this these guys' jobs to like fight for people when something wrong happened? And something clearly wrong happened to my grandmother. So frankly, it kind of pissed me off, and I'm like, maybe I could do this and actually be there for people and actually care about people. So that was kind of the first spark in my journey. But I went on to go to college and obviously then law school, but that was the kind of the origin of it.
Yeah. And I know you by way of social media. That's how I got to know you. Obviously, I'm not intimately knowing all the attorneys in Philadelphia, which is where you're out of, is Philly, which we lived in Philly actually for, I think it was 6 or 8 years. My husband worked for the Flyers.
Oh,
So
nice.
I am a huge Philly fan. That's my first team of NHL that I just absolutely fell in love with. And my kids were born in Philly, my younger two, so we love Philly. But you have won for your clients over $123 million so far. And when I'm thinking about this and your passion for justice, right? Because I think that's where so many attorneys, they get out of college, they go to law school, and it's that desire for justice. Of course, some people just do it to be a lawyer, or because their parents were lawyers, or for the money or whatever. But when I listen to you and I watch your videos, there's a strong sense of justice. And it feels to me that sense of justice is to women, children, people that have been really injured or traumatized or forever maimed, if you will, by a person or a system. And so what is it like when someone comes in and has a claim, and it is because of a large Philadelphia hospital, being a Philadelphia native, resident, I should say? What does that feel like when you're like, oh God, I have to take on Children's Hospital of Philadelphia because of that's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, I'm just thinking as you're talking about my first meeting with a family who had suffered a catastrophic injury. and I was wet behind the ears. I think I was 26,
Oh, wow.
36 now. I just started my job as a lawyer, and I was told to go meet with this family who's it was a gentleman who had just suffered a massive brain injury at a Philadelphia hospital that was caused by clear negligence. So I go and I meet, and I go into the hospital lobby, and we've all seen hospital lobbies. They're kind of like, bustling with, there's a cafe, and then there's elevators, and there's benches, and it was really unnatural. And I was nervous, and I was in a suit, and I'm 26, and I walk up. Oh, I walk up to this. Sorry, my computer kind of froze there. Sorry, I walk up to this family, and it's the wife, it's the three daughters, and they're sitting there. And I mean, these people had just learned a half hour ago that this guy was gonna never speak again, never move again, brain dead essentially. And I remember just feeling a sense of complete hopelessness and helplessness, talking to them and listening to them. It was painful, it was difficult, and I just remember feeling their pain so much and not having no idea what to say. And I think I realized in that moment there isn't much for you to say in those moments. What really people want from you, I think, as the lawyer, is to listen and to understand, and to know that you're going to fight for them.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to strike a balance between feeling your client's pain, because if you don't feel your client's pain and you don't live with that in some sense, you cannot be a zealous advocate for them. You just can't.
That's what I was just going to ask. Yeah. Like, when the attorney comes out of law school, like they're zealous, right? They're excited. They're like going to take on the world. They're bringing everybody down. And they're going to save everybody. They're going to save the world. I think that's why many doctors go in, right? How do you stay attached while at the same time being detached enough that you don't become sick, that you don't become home and, bring the dread of the day home to your family? How do you separate ensuring that you stay connected and empathetic without having to become apathetic? Like, what is that like?
Well, I definitely have gotten better at it over time, because when I first started out, I would just take on the trauma and the emotional, weight of every single client.
Yeah.
But like, to your point, that's just not sustainable. It's not healthy. And I had to learn, over time, I've learned by banging my head against the wall. I'm not one of those guys who just like,
I'm a hand on the stove girl. I say it here all the time. I have to touch that stove.
Yeah.
I have to burn myself. I have to know. I have to look at the blister. Yeah, I'm that girl.
Exactly. So, but now I have two little kids myself. My son's about to be 5 in a couple of weeks, and my daughter's 3. So I've learned to not to. I don't want to say separate, because you never really can separate.
Compartmentalize, maybe.
Yeah, and just go home and actually be home. And it helps to just look at my kids and have that unconditional love of. And sometimes I come home and I just look at them and I'm like, after having talked to parents whose child died or whose child is completely disabled for life, it's really a perspective shifter for not minimizing your problems, because everybody has issues, and I don't think we should diminish anybody's experience, but also at the same time, it's helpful to like, okay, I'm going to put that in this compartment over here. Now I'm home with my kids, and look, they're healthy, they're happy, they're running around. So it's a daily process for me.
Yeah, I do. I work with clients as a life coach, and I always tell, people are always like, how do you do that? I'm, very, very much kind of like a therapist, in a way, but not. And I'm always like, I sit in the same chair. And when I'm in that chair, that's what I do. And then when I get out of that chair, because there's also a part of this where you have to have a clear head. You can't be so emotional that you lose sight of the law and how you're going to get your outcome. Because as I watch your videos and I learn more about you, you do handle a lot of injury to newborns, with the cerebral palsy and these types of injuries with oxygen loss over long periods of time. And as I was watching your videos, my oldest son, he was born with a tracheoesophageal fistula that should have been found during, because the stomach is not there when doing an ultrasound. And you also have polyhydrosis, which is like I mean, I was humongous, 23-year-old. I looked like I was having triplets. And he ended up being 6 pounds. That's how much water I had in me.
Right.
I think
You would think they would pick that up, kind of comparing the size of the fetus with what was going on with you. But anyways.
Yeah, because I was like a normal size woman, normal size 23-year-old. And also, they should have been able to see it during ultrasound, because the stomach is completely not there for whatever reason. They don't swallow the water or whatever, hence why you have so much amniotic fluid. But I think, as being a woman, especially of a newborn, our first child, you follow the cues of the medical professionals. You trust them 100%. You basically give your health and life over to these doctors. And you've seen some of the most horrific end results of giving your life over to doctors. Where's the balance? Where do we find the balance in as a woman, as a family, as humans having children? What do we do?
All your questions are so great and difficult to answer. That's why they're good questions. But it's so hard, because especially, and I do represent a ton of parents with catastrophically injured children, like you said, and it's a deep passion of mine, because there's nobody more vulnerable and helpless than a child, an unborn child. And there's so much optimism. I'm a parent too. There's so much optimism and
on that day
and leading up to it.
Yeah.
Pregnancy, we're going to be parents, or, we're going to have another kid, whatever. And that's good. That should be that way. But what I find, unfortunately, is that a lot of times in the context of birth injuries, where there's this sustained deprivation of oxygen, which is really basically the crux of what happens when there's birth negligence, there's a lack of transparency, a lack of accountability, and a lack of forthcomingness from the providers in terms of what happened and why wasn't the baby delivered sooner? Why wasn't an emergency C-section called? Or why wasn't this picked up on ultrasound? I have a case right now where a child had a really treatable heart defect, should have been detected on ultrasound, wasn't. And because it wasn't, the child was born in a hospital that didn't have a cardiac surgeon, which is exactly what he needed right when he was born to operate. And had that been there, he'd be fine. But because he didn't get that, because of one misread on an ultrasound, one mistake on an ultrasound, he suffered an anoxic brain injury at birth, and now he is a CP. So I think the balance is not losing yourself in that optimism and that excitement of the process, but also informing yourself and being informed and knowing the medicine, and not necessarily being a backseat driver when you're in labor, but knowing the basics. And that's why I do the videos on TikTok. It's why I do the videos on social media. I got enough cases. I don't I'm not marketing. I'm talking, and I want people to know this is what's going on. And here's information that might be helpful to you, so that people can at least have that at their disposal.
Yeah. I mean, being informed, right? Like paying attention to the signs. As it were, my son was born, and they put him, he was born, when my water broke, they had to bring in mops. It was like insane. And then when he was born, as the water was breaking, my stomach was getting smaller and smaller and smaller. They throw me on Pitocin, and he was born. I held him for a few minutes, and then they took him off to the side and just started hitting him, trying to get him to like do what was necessary, because his stomach was connected to his lungs. And then he was life flighted. And 3 days later, after they perforated 3 holes in his stomach, they finally found, a nurse found, with an NG tube. That's a tube they put down the nose to the stomach. They found that it went nowhere. And then now we know what's going on. But between point A and point B, as you're saying, it would have been very easy by way of an ultrasound at 5-6 months to find out that this was the problem. He would have been delivered immediately. He wouldn't have suffered all of those things. He was on antibiotics for so long. He now suffers with bilateral hearing loss. Also, I was 23.
Right.
And even though my dad's a lawyer, he is a criminal lawyer. And I didn't have anyone around me to say, this is a lawsuit. This is problematic. And so we never saw anything from any of it because of statute of limitations and all that stuff. Do you, in your practice, ever work with hospitals, doctors, OBGYNs and say, where's the checks and balances here? Where's the book that says stomach, check, brain, check? You know what I mean? Where we can kind of have some continuity of care and get ahead of these things instead of being behind these things.
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. Healthcare, unfortunately, is a business in our country. It's been transformed into a complete profit-driven enterprise. That's not always how it's been. Obviously, doctors have always been paid for their time and made money, but we are quite literally in a crisis, in my opinion, in terms of the healthcare system as a whole. I don't think people really understand how bad it is. We have private equity infiltrating healthcare, which is, if anyone doesn't know what that is, private equity is essentially a group of rich guys that come buy a company with the sole purpose of kind of gutting the company and reselling it a couple of years down the line to make a big profit.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all good and fine, I guess, if you want to do that with a McDonald's franchise or whatever. But we're talking about healthcare here, right? There's and on top of that, there's just so much emphasis on profit, such understaffing issues in medicine, including in health systems that have plenty of money, billions of dollars. So I think that, and having talked to experts, having talked to doctors, because I remember I have to hire doctors on my side to go against the doctors we sue. So I know that the system's absolutely, it's like burning. It's like it's on fire. And until we fix that, we're going to continue to have these outcomes, because what I'm finding more and more is that it isn't always necessarily an incompetent or unskilled doctor or provider. Almost always at this point, you can trace the outcome back to some systemic problem. There wasn't enough staff. They weren't hiring enough doctors. They weren't spending enough money, right? And so
Time.
yeah,
I mean,
when you
now
don't,
HMOs,
yeah,
you got to be in and out, and you have 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes. If you're not seeing what's 6, 7, 8, 10 patients in 1 hour, you're behind on your billing.
but patience, and I was one of the people who, before I did this, I was someone, literally, if the doctor said stand on your head for 3 hours, I would do it. I didn't question anything. I just blindly trusted. And I think that's fair. But if I said to a random person on the sidewalk, the healthcare industry is a business, they really don't care as much about your health as they do about making money, they would go, what do you mean? I think most people have a hard time accepting that, even though it is true. So again, education and knowing that, I think, gives people more of an arsenal to like advocate for themselves if and when they have to.
Yeah. What would you say, like, because I know you're big on like top threes. Like, I love a top three. I love it. I love a top three. It just kind of boils it down. And oddly, I do want to, after we get to top three, I want to talk about your worst case you were talking about that I saw was um, a carpal tunnel case. Of all the cases, what a weird case to be the worst that you've seen. But what would you say is your like top three things or top five that you do as a family, as a father, as a human, that you're like, dude, if I've learned anything, these are some things I definitely practice in my house or as a human out in the world.
Wow, that's tough to distill down, but yeah, number one, I think, with regard to going to the doctors, if you can, always have someone else with you. You
Good
can't always
advice.
do that, right? So I'm not saying, like, if you're having a heart attack, wait for your spouse to get home. That's not what I'm saying. But to the extent you can control it, have someone with you, because what I see time and time again in medical malpractice cases is that, um, the family member or the victim or both say, "Hey, the doctor told us X, Y, and Z. This is what was happening," and it could even be reflected in the medical records that that's what happened. But then, of course, the doctor comes in, the doctor is sued, And guess what? They take the stand or they're under oath. No, that's not what happened. Everything was great, blah, 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 blah. So, when it's one person's word against theirs, remember, people still have this inherent intrinsic trust of healthcare. I think that's eroding because I think people are becoming more hip to what's really going on, but
Yeah.
it's a tough stigma to deconstruct. So to the extent you can have someone else that was there, that witnessed it, that can say, no, that's actually not what happened. And again, nobody wants to think about this. You don't want to go to the doctor thinking someday I'll be suing, but these are things that I now think of. Number two.
Well, let me interrupt you too. Yeah. From a positive standpoint, when I went through breast cancer myself, you hear one word, you are going to have surgery. As the patient, you stop there. The doctor keeps talking because you're now, what do you mean I'm having surgery? When's the surgery going to happen? What does this entail? So now you're processing, you're going to have surgery. Your advocate who's in the room with you that you brought with you, they hear the rest of the paragraph.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I mean? And so a lot of times it's nice to have someone there because I had to actually have 2 surgeries. I didn't have clear margins after my first surgery. Mm-hmm. And so I went to my son's college graduation 2 days after a breast cancer surgery and announced to the entire table, my ex-husband, his new wife, all the kids, my mom, I'm done. I had surgery and now I don't have to have chemo and now I just have to have, and we left that dinner and my husband goes, what are you talking about? And I had missed the paragraph, which was, we have to see if you have clear margins. And then once we see that, I had missed the whole paragraph because I had heard your surgery looks great, blah, 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 blah. So not just from another set of ears in case you have to go to court, have an advocate there because you only hear the sentence and you will have someone there to hear the rest of the paragraph. So that is my advice for someone that's been through it, especially even as a mom, to have, if you're there for your child, a mom and a dad. When my son was born, they ushered us into a room. Thank God my husband of the time was with us. They said, sit down. You have to basically sign, and death, is a possibility for your son's surgery. And so I signed it. And then I pushed the paper over as a 23-year-old to my husband and said, you're signing this too.
Right.
I'm not signing my son's and death as a possibility's life away. So a lot of times it's good to have 2 people there because big decisions can be made last minute. They can be made without you paying attention, with your head being in the clouds. You could be on medication. There's a million reasons why to have 2 people at doctor's appointments, not only for yourself, but for your children as well. Sorry. Okay. Now you've had plenty of time to talk about number 2.
Well, no, I'm going to go off the path if you don't mind, because you made me think about something. I think, do you know what health systems are doing now, including in Philadelphia? And I'll just tell you, it's University of Pennsylvania Health System, which is regarded as one of the best institutions in Philly. Right. But what they're doing, and this is in line with what you said about having someone there and a second set of eyes, let me just step back and tell you that when you have a medical malpractice case, the county that you are in drastically dictates how likely you are to succeed in your case and how much money you're likely to receive from a jury. So a case in Philadelphia County where you're getting a Philadelphia jury, you're not in the same, statistical ballpark of winning as if one county over, Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, because the juries are so different. They're a different demographic of people who are deciding your case, and they vary greatly. So a case in Philadelphia that most lawyers that do what I do could value at $10 to $15 million could literally be valued as a defense verdict in Montgomery County. Wow. It's that big of a deal. But what Penn is doing now is they slipped into, one of those forms that you sign when you go into the doctor that they don't even sometimes show it to you on the computer screen, but they hand you the
box
thing and say sign. So what Penn slipped into there is a paragraph that says, I agree that if I file a medical malpractice lawsuit, I'll only file it in the county where the medical care occurred. And the reason they did that is because the regular law lets you sue in any county you want where Penn does business. So Penn, as you know, is headquartered in Philadelphia. Best place to be if you're filing a lawsuit, Philadelphia. Penn doesn't want people who go to Penn office in Montgomery County or New Jersey or whatever to be able to avail themselves of the law and file, God forbid, file a malpractice case in Philadelphia County. So they're literally having people sign their rights away on a form that most of us just glance over,
Yeah.
right? And most people won't have to end up in that spot one day. But imagine being that person that signs the form and then your leg is amputated because you're treated negligently and you lose your leg.
Yeah.
And then you go into court and they go, nope, you can't be in Philadelphia County. See this thing that you signed 3 years ago? So I say that to respond to what you said about having a second set of eyes and how important it is, but also to point out that this whole idea that healthcare companies and health systems are Mother Teresa's, we just need to kind of we just need to like put that out of our minds. It's just not true. And that, they are operating with a bottom line in mind. So,
I just imagine we need to start pretending like they're all mechanics. And so we're bringing our vehicle in for service, and there's a pretty good chance that there's going to tell us either something is wrong with the vehicle or not wrong with the vehicle, and we need to be a little bit more raised eyebrow when we go in to get our vehicle maintenance maintained.
So, sorry, I didn't mean to go down that rabbit hole, but
no, it's true. I mean, and none of us are reading that. We just want to get service. There is definitely the assumption of good. There's the assumption of good. You walk into a used car lot, it's the assumption of bad. We
Right.
walk into healthcare facility, it's the assumption of good. They are here to help me end of day.
But here's the complicated part with the healthcare thing. So like, I genuinely believe, and I have friends who are doctors and nurses, like close friends, family members. They really, overwhelmingly, these people want to go in to do good and to help people, right?
Yep.
What's difficult, though, is when you're dealing with healthcare, there's a dichotomy between the providers and then the administration. That's not one thing, right? And a lot of the administration they're executives, they're corporate people. They didn't work in the field. They weren't doctors. They weren't nurses.
It's a business.
It's a business. So it's not that, like, I don't want to be misunderstood. It's not that you're going into the ER and the ER doctor's like, ooh, I'm going to screw you over. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that these people, these providers are operating within a system that's inherently flawed and operating like a business. So when you have that tension and you're dealing with health and you're dealing with life and death, you're going to have big problems.
Yeah, I mean, I have a ton of doctors, especially where I live. Like the flex where I live is that you can basically text a doctor at any time to have them come over and give your kids, stitches or whatever. Like that's the flex in my town.
It's a pretty good flex. I mean,
it's a hell of a flex.
Yeah.
I literally have one of the Major League Baseball team's orthopedic surgeons in my contacts. It just happens to be a friend of ours.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we got some.
I played college baseball, so I'm jealous.
Oh yeah. So it's a pretty big flex. And yes, you're right. These physicians would do anything to help beyond. I mean, they will come to your house. They'll help you and your family at any time for any reason. And that's what they do at work. And that is why they work. But they also have an umbrella that they're underneath. They don't know what you're signing at the front door. They just want the best. They don't know what kind of legalese is going on page 3 of Form 10. They're just doing their job. You come in, you're a body that needs fixed, and they want you to do well. Unfortunately, some things do happen. Like with both of the things that we're talking about, it's an ultrasound situation that was missed. Maybe the person woke up late. Maybe they weren't paying attention. Maybe the radiologist read it wrong. There's a myriad of reasons from point A to point Z as to how things get dropped. However, from our conversations, it does feel like we need to maybe reel in the ultrasound sphere a little bit and having some box checking going on over there.
Well, that, not to go down that rabbit hole, but you're right, because here's the deal. I think any mom who gets an ultrasound rightly assumes, like, because think about it, like every ultrasound that you get as a mother is critically important to you and your baby. And that's how you should view it. That's the truth. But what you might not know is that there are so many ultrasound images that that the practice that you're going to, that the doctors there need to look at, right? And if they're not staffed properly, which is the case in my case, which is against Penn, by the way, involved a situation where I start taking depositions, testimony, and I find out, holy smokes, you've got, one or two doctors, but they're they're reading an astronomical amount of images that any person, the best ultrasound interpreter, the best OBGYN, the best maternal medicine specialist in the world would miss stuff,
Yeah.
right? But you think that those doctors are telling the moms at the front door, hey, by the way, I'm massively overworked and I have to look at a zillion ultra. Of course not. Do you
No.
think the moms know that? No. Why would they think that would happen? Right. So again, an example there of that's the structure that the doctors are operating within. They didn't choose to be understaffed. But again, that's like, what does that matter to you if you're the mom when your son's defect wasn't picked up, right? So
Yep.
it's scary, and I'm like, I have to constantly like not become an alarmist. I'm trying not to be
I can't
because
even. I mean, I was thinking about you this morning. I was making coffee, and I'm just like, what's all the shit that he's over there going? Okay, be very mindful when opening the soup cans. I have seen so many people cut their fibrillar artery when opening soup.
But by the way, which I'm sorry, I'm glad you brought this up because I feel like people like have this like viewpoint of me because I do talk a lot about crazy stuff like that, but I am so not like
Alarmist.
a helicopter parent or I'm like I grew up. I mean, I was a tree climbing crazy kid, like broken bones, trampolines, skiing, skateboarding, four wheelers, and I love that stuff, and I love it for my kids. So I'm not like anti fun, and I think it's funny though because people, I get comments sometimes on TikTok. They're like, "Oh, you don't let your kids do anything." I'm like, "No, like I'm a human being," but I just think like we all should know, what's
Right.
going on. That's
Pay a little closer attention. So, what's the number two thing? So bring a buddy to
yep.
doctor's appointments. Period, if you can.
Mhm. Number two, ooh, uh, I think Roundup, which I don't know if anyone's like Roundup, the weed spray, the weed killer, decades ago, and the active ingredient glyphosate has been linked to blood cancers like leukemia and lymphoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma for decades. But not only that, the evidence, because I represent a bunch of folks in cases against Monsanto for Roundup. Monsanto was talking internally in writing about the fact that they knew that their product caused cancer years and years and years ago, internally, privately. They've never warned about it. They've never put a warning on the bottle that says it does cause cancer, it could cause cancer, never. But they're internally talking about the fact that it does or that it could. Those are, you know, so I would say number two, like don't use Roundup, but I guess more broadly would be you can't be educated enough or thorough enough in every product you buy, and you should never assume the safety or whatever of anything and dig because again we live in a society, a culture, and a government where I think in large part due to our politicians just totally blowing us off and being in the pockets of corporate interests, we just have a very lax situation in our country where whether it's kids' toys or food or products like Roundup, there's so many things that I can tell you are really dangerous that are just on the shelves, right?
Yeah.
And so that my number two would just be to be educated about that stuff as best you can.
If you can't read any of the ingredients, it might not be good for you. If you have
Exactly.
zero ability to read hyperprominic flur, there might be not healthy.
And then it's like 8 paragraphs, and you're like that's also you're like I don't know.
Or at least wear a hazmat suit, right? When you are using it, and stay away from your house for 24 hours. I mean, because you do have to buy. I mean, some of these houses, I remember living in Florida for a couple of years, and you would drive by, and people would be tenting their houses for termites and things of that nature. So I mean, there are good reasons to have chemicals, but just be mindful about them.
Yeah.
You know, one of back to the case of the carpal tunnel, and I was thinking about another one of your cases where the mom is sent home. coming into labor, and the mom is sent home. And as I was thinking about you talking about this, it almost sometimes feels elitist from the doctor's perspective of, go home, little woman, you're not ready yet. It gives me that. It gives me those vibes of, go home, little woman. You're being silly, you're being ridiculous, you're being alarmist, you're here too early, your kid is fine. I had a doctor tell me that my daughter was fine for, I think it was 4 months. As everything that I breastfed her, she would throw up all over me. She would scream. She's covered in acne. She did the shooting legs, in pain. And I kept saying, I think she's allergic to milk. And they're like, oh, all moms think that. All moms think that. And then she finally had a poopy diaper, and it basically looked like phlegm with blood in it. And I drove the diaper right then and there to the doctor's office, and I said, here. And the doctor goes, oh, she's allergic to milk. Right? And so that minute I stopped eating all dairy, and she was totally fine. Her skin cleared up. She stopped. She was able. And what they don't understand is, especially when you're nursing, and is you feed your baby for, however many minutes, and then they throw all of it up, and then you have to start over. You have to feed them again.
It's a huge labor. Yeah.
And you literally, I would just lay in bed crying.
Yeah.
Because you're hurt. I'm now maimed. My breasts are now maimed from constant feeding. And
you're not getting any break. She's tired. She's hungry. It's
and you're 2 o'clock in the morning, and she just projectile vomiting. And it's like, if I'm coming in as this would have been a third time mother, I've now been a mom for over a decade. I've done this a couple times, and I'm telling you something is wrong. What is that? Because like you're saying, a lot of these cerebral palsy cases are from women being sent home or not listened to. What, where, how? How, Tom? How? What do we do? Why do they send women home? Why? And are you seeing these cases more with men or with women? Because when I listen to your cases, they're women.
No, it's there's a distinct issue with how healthcare providers treat and respond to and listen to women. There's a unique issue, and you're not wrong. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's real. The data backs it up. There's been studies about it, and what I see over and over again. And I, ended up actually getting the biggest medical malpractice verdict in Pennsylvania for the entire year of 2022 in a case involving my client, who was a woman who kept being dismissed and sent home by her primary care doctor. She had a spinal tumor that went undiagnosed for 4 years, and she kept going with, first it was back pain, then it was back pain and it radiated into the rib cage. Then her legs got numb. Then her legs started never a CAT scan, never an x-ray, never an MRI of the spine. And it was always, oh, you work a lot, or you're overweight, or, and I see it with women far more than I see it with men. And I think it's this, unfortunately, this underlying societal, I don't want to say stigma.
Hysteria. It's like 1800s hysteria.
It is the 1900s. It is the 1900s hysteria thing in modern form, right? Yeah. It's this concept that, oh, women are dramatic or whatever. The problem is obviously that's insane and not actually how the world works, but it has infiltrated healthcare, and so many of my cases involving birth injury or women involve them being dismissed, not heard, not listened to. And it's every day I talk to somebody where this has happened. So you would think that that sort of stereotype wouldn't infiltrate the medical field, and that people would be smart enough to root that out. But it really depends on the provider you get. So I would just say, like, and sometimes, again, you don't have a choice if it's an emergency, but to the extent you're like seeking out a provider, like if you get a bad feeling in your stomach and you're like, they're not hearing me, like they're not, I'm talking, but they're not, like, don't roll the dice with that. Like, find someone else. Like, it's not worth it. You can't afford to, and you don't deserve to have somebody whose life is in your hands, who you're like not totally sure they're even listening to you. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that we have to talk about this is a little crazy, but you're right. That is a problem.
And I think you know, I'm sure you see too, as women or people of color even being more not listened to, why it's so important to have people of color in the medical field so that it's balanced. You know, there's more balance of people of color being treated by people of color, women being treated by women. Because I think that there is more of a continuity of care when you see yourself in your practice as your patients, and when you can go to see a doctor that hears you, sees you, understands you, and is listening to you. um, because I do think that, you know, there is that hysteria, you're being dramatic. I find it fascinating. I got a blood test result recently, and I put it into Chat GPT, and Chat was like, "Hey, you should ask for all these blood tests to follow up on that." And I just sent it to my doctor on my chart. I'm like, "Hey, I want you to test me for this," and she
Right.
sent it over, and lo and behold, there was like 3 things that came up. But it made me feel actually much more empowered than just, oh, okay. And you know, she didn't order those tests, you know what I mean? And I told her about it, and I just got a weird thyroid result back, and she's like, "Oh, I'll test you again in a month." And I'm just like, what if I have thyroid cancer? Like, it's changed that much, that drastic. Like, it's gone up 3 times of what it was 8 months ago. Which, if you know anything about cancer, it moves fast and furious. It's not something that's gradual. It's like that. And so I'm like, oh God, I have to wait 8 months to figure out if there's actually something wrong with me. Like, and that's scary. But we do also gaslight ourselves, you know. And as women, you know, just background, if people don't understand women, we will literally sit on a couch and be murdered as to be polite. We will gaslight ourselves and be like, well, I don't want to get up and run as the serial killer is standing in the living room with me, or, you know, whatever. We'll just be like, okay. I mean, we are trained from birth to be nice. We are trained from birth to be kind. And so unfortunately, we won't cause a ruckus. And I mean, we won't even go to a different beautician. We'll switch whole salons instead of going to a different beautician in the same salon. We'll just pretend like we died and go to a different salon. So if you think for a minute we're going to easily switch doctors, let alone OBGYNs, etc., and just be like, yeah, you didn't do what I wanted you to do, or you're not listening to me, I'm going to get a second opinion, etc. Like, women won't go to a different beautician. So that is how programmed we are to be nice. It is important to not gaslight yourself and to not be gaslit into, oh, you're just stressed, your overweight's a big one. I mean, I walked in, and I've talked about this on social media. When I had breast cancer, I walked in. This is my first experience with a medical professional as a breast cancer diagnosis. And I sat down, and she's like, all right, so I'm your first person. She is my surgeon, which she did an excellent job. Don't get me wrong, I'm still alive. And she goes, well, one thing I'm noticing is that you're super fat.
No.
Swear to God, on my kid's life. This is my first human being that I am seeing. I don't know what is going to happen to me. All I know in the world is I have breast cancer. And all she can talk about is how fat I am. I'm
Yeah,
like, what
that's
is
crazy.
happening?
Yeah, that's insane. Yeah, I'm not surprised just because I do this, but yeah, it's another. Yeah, I mean, it just makes me think that there are people, and I encounter them, physicians who absolutely shouldn't be doctors. There are lawyers who shouldn't be lawyers too. There are cops who shouldn't be cops. But that's a great point, because I think a lot of physicians, love you guys, don't get mad at me in the
Right,
comment.
right.
We get a lot of attackers, but here's the thing, like, you get a lot of people who really excelled academically and are very science minded. All that's great too in terms of medicine. We want people who know science and know what they're doing. But it's a human thing too. Like, medicine and treating people, it's human. And so you hear a lot of people complain about bedside manner. Like, that's been a thing that people talk about all the time. But I go a step further with it. I don't think it's just merely like I don't think it's a benign thing. Like, if someone has bedside manner, I actually think that someone who has poor bedside manner, that oftentimes can relate to them being a poor physician, because
Mm,
they're not separated things, right? Like, just Like, sure, there's that guy or that gal who has poor bedside manner, but they're like Grey's Anatomy genius or whatever. But I see it a lot too, where it's like poor bedside manner can be translated into you have poor communication skills, you have poor listening skills, you are
Or the
arrogant.
person in front of you is not a person.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They're not human, or you're arrogant, and or you don't second guess yourself. Like those are all horrible traits, right? So, yeah, I'm sorry that happened to you, but
That's all
it's
right. I lost weight because of it, and I quit drinking because she also used to give me so much shit too. She'd be like, "You drink too much," which in hindsight, she was right. You know what I
yeah.
mean? I'm sober over 21 months now,
Oh,
but
good job!
thank you,
Congratulations. I've been
thank you.
sober for 14 years.
Oh, really?
I
So
haven't had a drink since I was 22 years old. I'm happy to say that publicly, but you know, good.
was there a turning point for you? I kind of figured I'm like, why am I doing this? What's the end game? If I drink a bottle of wine and it's from 6 to 9 o'clock at night, where the hell am I going at 9 o'clock? What am I doing with this bottle of wine in my system at night? So it started to not make sense.
Yeah, if you looked at my family tree for about 10 seconds in terms of alcohol, you would not be confused as to why I don't drink. But I was 22, I was a junior in college, and I was lucky enough to have like a moment of desperation where I saw my life going down a certain pathway. And I asked for help, and
Good.
like by the grace of God, I'm now I'm here. But yeah, that's awesome. I bet you feel different.
Oh my gosh, my skin, like people are like, how are you 52? Like, I
Yeah,
mean, I literally age backwards. There's one, and I'm a much better parent.
yeah,
I parent very differently. My kids are my children very differently. You know, they look at alcohol very differently now compared to during COVID when, you crack a beer at noon because why not?
right.
Um, but I do want to talk about you really quick because we don't have a whole lot of time. And you just, you opened your practice at 33 years old, your own practice. So congratulations for that.
Thank-
That's huge.
Thanks.
And you just hired your seventh attorney.
Yep.
I mean, you are a practice. You. It's not just you in an office with a secretary. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but you're growing something over there. And to me, it feels like you're growing something out of the love of people. And as you talked about your grandmother, and whatever she went through, and how you had. Ugh, sorry, I
Sorry.
watched that video. um, what you went through at 18, watching her. Sorry, wow. um, so do you think about her as you go through what you do?
Yeah, every day. Um, yeah, every day. It's I'm grateful it's personal to me because I think that gives me the ability to sit with somebody who's going through this and say I really do understand what you're feeling. And um, I do love I love what I do, and I'm not like blowing smoke up anyone's butt. I'm grateful we're growing. I just want our firm to be the place where people know they can go for not just really good representation, because our numbers and our results don't lie. But we're not those lawyers on a billboard who look like everybody else who are, hi, hire us. Like, we walk the walk, but we also are adamant that we are compassionate. We will treat you like a family member, and we want people to feel seen and heard. That's really important through this process, which is a traumatic thing to go through the legal process after you've already gone through something, right? So I'm hoping that I can change the legal landscape in the sense of kind of getting away from the traditional model of a injury lawyer as this kind of sterile billboard, all those stereotypes, and really
The
be
hammer. We have the hammer in
right.
Chicago.
It's like the one guy has the hammer, the other one has a sledgehammer, the other one has it's like, okay, you know what I mean? Like it's, but yeah, I think about her all the time, and I take cases. We got the biggest settlement publicly that's been reported in Pennsylvania for a malpractice suicide death case, and my grandmother died from suicide in the context of being negligently discharged. And so that one means a lot. And I know that my client in that case felt like cared for by me and not judged and not stigmatized, and that was so important. And to add value to that case, like I could care less about how much money I made off the case, but what I do care about is setting that precedent of, you know, um, you paid out this much money in a suicide case, and we're not gonna do the whole thing where we, devalue people because they took their own life, and we're not gonna, because a lot of times defense lawyers or insurance companies, they'll use those stigmas to try to devalue what happened. So that's another big part of what I want to do is to really chip away at these stigmas that we have in society and make sure every single person comes to the court and comes to a case fairly treated and adequately treated. And I don't, if you know anything about me, I'm a little bit stubborn. So I don't really like back down to these pressures of, oh, well, this is what happens in this type of case. Like
Yeah.
I'm not someone who will cave to that, but
Yeah. I always think I was telling somebody about a restaurant here in town recently, and I'm like, it's the best restaurant because they use all of the grandmother's authentic Italian um, recipes. And the dad's nuts. He owns a place and he's running around all the time, and you just feel that sense of family. You feel that sense of wanting to share the love, the tradition, and the more I learned about you before coming on and having you on today, um, and us talking about how you and I are hands on the stove kind of people, like we have to touch it. But once I think that someone like you touches it, which was your grandmother, you touched it. You lived it, you touched it, you saw it, you saw the ramifications of people not caring, you saw the ramifications of people not caring for their patients, and what can happen from that. That that stove that you touched when you were 18 has grown a law firm of taking care of people like myself, like my son, like my relatives. I mean, we're sitting here on a podcast recording, and it's like so many of the things that you represent in a day has touched my family personally, which is wild to think about. We're just two people on a podcast, and so I thank you for touching the stove that day and for taking something away from that. And if you don't have a picture of your family to remind everybody in that law firm why you do what you do, and how important it is to remember that everyone that comes through the doors to visit with you are real people with real problems that they could be dealing with for the rest of their life. You need to get a picture of that woman up there because she changed the life for thousands and thousands of people in the area of Philadelphia and the people that you work with, because she changed the course of direction for your life, which changed the course of direction for your entire law firm, which there, in fact, changed the course of direction for every person that you talk to on social media or otherwise. And so, even though her life was a tragic loss, it was not in vain, because everything that you do every day changes the lives of people forever. And so I thank her for her changing you. I really do. It's not
that's
in
nice.
vain.
That's sweet.
It's
You're gonna make
true.
me you're gonna make me emotional.
It's true.
That's really nice. Yeah. I think that's yeah, I have she's up there on my wall, but we could use a bigger portrait maybe out in the out in
Why
the
we
main.
do what we do, and that's why I do what I do. My son's situation changed the trajectory of my entire life, and I used to be a selfish 22-year-old, so like whatever, and going through what I went through and everything that I go through, divorce, breast cancer, whatever, it makes me a better me. It makes me be able to have these conversations from a place of, um, I get it. I see you, and I think that people that come on my show, maybe feel that. I don't know, but I see you, Tom, and I'm so glad that I get to know you on a longer format, because what you bring to the world on social media, and we're going to talk about that on my other podcast, it does change lives, because you are informing people that might have a high school education, who might feel like victims, might be being victimized, and you are changing the trajectory of uninformed, uneducated or very educated who just don't know. You're changing lives every day with every video that you post. So Meredyth Willits, thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing and putting yourself out there, because it's not easy, and it's sometimes is scary, and we'll talk about that when you're on over there. But it's not easy doing what you do, both as a lawyer and as a content creator. So I thank you.
Oh, thank you, Meredyth. You're the best. So I'm glad I'm on here. It's such a good forum, and we're talking about all this stuff. So it's great.
Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful day. Tom will be back on the TikTok Famous podcast in a few weeks, where we'll be talking about all the kind of the same things, but we'll be talking about content creation and his delivery, which I love. If you're not following him on TikTok and Instagram, I will have that in the show notes. But his delivery is 10 out of 10, superb. He got me sucked in, and he will you as well. So have a wonderful day, Tom. And for everyone else, I will see you guys back here next week with another guest, and we'll figure out why we do what we do. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Meredyth.
Thanks for listening. If you would like to connect on a more personal level, head over to meredythwillits.com or on Instagram at Meredyth with a Y for behind-the-scene footage and outtakes. Please subscribe and come back each week for more Meredyth with a Y. Thanks again for listening.